My name is Madeline Carter, and on Thanksgiving night, I drove 3 hours through fog to bring my mom her favorite pie, just like I did every year. I thought I was coming home, I thought I was family, but before I even set the pie down, my father looked at me and said, "Give back the 50,000, or don't bother coming home again. If you've ever been blindsided by the people who were supposed to love you most, stay with me. Leave a comment if you've ever had to choose peace over family. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us sometimes. Survival starts with walking away. Let me take you back to where it all began. I was still holding the pie when my father told me not to come home again. It was warm pumpkin, the kind with extra nutmeg and that little splash of maple syrup my mom insisted on, even though she never explained why. I had baked it the night before, just like every year. Drove 3 hours through mountain fog, headlights slicing through the dark, all for this moment. I thought I was coming home. It was Thanksgiving. The table was set. Silver candlesticks, folded linen napkins. Mom's crystal dish was filled with steaming stuffing. The turkey hadn't been carved yet. We hadn't said grace. I was still standing, coat half off, pie in my hands, when my father looked up and said, "Give back the 50,000, Madeline, or don't bother coming home again." I thought I'd misheard him. I stood there, blinking. A strange, quiet buzzing filled the space between his voice and the clink of a serving spoon being set down. No one laughed. Natalie sat at the far end of the table, her hands folded in her lap like it was a courtroom, not a holiday. Evan didn't look up, just stared at the tablecloth like it held the answer to a question he didn't want to ask. Even my mother, soft-spoken, sentimental, wouldn't meet my eyes. She adjusted the edge of the casserole tray, pressed her lips together. I didn't sit down, couldn't. The pie had suddenly become heavy in my arms, heavier than it should have been. I looked at it, like maybe it could explain what was happening, like maybe it could fix it. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Dad's jaw locked. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. What exactly are you accusing me of?" Natalie looked up. Her eyes were swollen, mascara clinging to the corners. She'd been crying, but her voice didn't tremble. "Mom's account. $50,000 disappeared last month, right after you helped her set up the online banking." For a second, I couldn't find words. I had helped Mom. She didn't like paperless statements, didn't trust the cloud. I'd sat with her at the kitchen table one Sunday afternoon, walked her through the logins, passwords, and security questions. She'd written everything down in a little floral notebook we kept in the drawer. That was 4 weeks ago. Now they were saying that was the moment I stole from her. "You think I took Mom's money?" My voice cracked. Evan finally spoke. It hurt to hear him. We didn't want to believe it. Mads. But the bank confirmed. It was done online. No one else had access. No one else. Except me. I turned to Mom. She still wouldn't look at me. She picked up her napkin, dabbed at her mouth like she might be sick. That was when I felt it. The shift. The pie. The fog. The tradition. None of it mattered. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a suspect. I set the pie down carefully on the counter. The tray made a soft, metallic sound against the granite. I reached for my coat, the one I hadn't even finished taking off. "You have until the end of the week," Dad said behind me, quiet but final. "Then we go to the lawyer." I didn't say a word, didn't cry, didn't plead. I walked out the front door, the smell of rosemary and cinnamon following me into the cold. It was Thanksgiving night. But for me, the holiday had already ended. The motel smelled like old carpet and microwave popcorn. I didn't ask for the Wi-Fi password. I didn't ask how late the lobby stayed open or whether they had extra blankets. I just gave the clerk my ID, signed the line, and took the keycard without looking up. It was Thanksgiving night, and I had checked into the Red Fern Inn, mile marker 118 just outside of Silverfield. The place I passed a dozen times but never once thought I'd stay in. I hadn't cried in the car. No screaming. No hitting the steering wheel like they do in the movies. I just drove, hands steady, coat still unbuttoned, breath shallow in my chest. The pie was still sitting untouched on the Carter family counter. And my name was no longer safe in that house. The room was small, beige curtains, a painting of a waterfall that didn't exist. I dropped my bag by the dresser and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress groaned. I didn't move. My hands rested on my knees like I didn't trust them to do anything else. I was 34 years old, senior forensic accountant at Graybridge Forensics, cleared for high-security audits, trusted with billions, and my family thought I stole from them. No, not just thought, believed. That was what stung. Not the accusation, but the ease of it, the quiet certainty, like they'd been waiting for an excuse. I let my head fall back against the wall, stared up at the ceiling fan. It wasn't spinning. It didn't need to. My thoughts were already doing that for it. The truth is, I wasn't surprised. Not entirely. There had been signs, not flashing neon warnings, just whispers. The way Natalie rolled her eyes every time Mom mentioned my promotions. The time Evan joked that I only got into Stanford because they needed more women in finance. Or last Christmas, when I offered to pay for the new roof. Dad thanked me, but Evan muttered something about buying approval. I laughed it off. I thought we were still family. I didn't see it then. Or maybe I refused to. I turned on the lamp by the bed. The light was dim, warm, almost kind. I pulled off my boots and sat cross-legged, fingers tightening into fists. How had it turned so fast? One moment I was bringing pie, the next, I was being told I had a week before they dragged my name through court. My phone buzzed. A text. Natalie. We didn't want it to come to this. But you made it hard to trust you. No happy Thanksgiving. No. Are you okay? Just that. Cold. Final. Like I had broken something. Like I owed them an apology. I stared at the screen for a long time before turning it face down on the nightstand. I didn't reply. I didn't know how to. At work, I spend my days unraveling fraud, shell companies, fake vendors, embezzlement schemes buried under layers of numbers and forged signatures. I know what it looks like when money disappears. I know what it looks like when someone makes it look like someone else's fault. Tonight, it looked like me. I slid my hands into my lap, palms up, like I was asking a question. What did they see when they looked at me? A daughter, a problem, a threat, or just convenient? I breathed in, slow and shallow. Outside the motel window, a porch light flickered. Someone down the hall laughed at a game show rerun. Life, apparently, was still happening. But in room 214, something had broken. I didn't know it yet. But this was the moment everything shifted. Not just in my family, but in me. Because if they were going to treat me like the criminal in the room, then maybe it was time I started investigating like one. Not for revenge, not yet, but for the truth. Because the thing about truth is, it leaves a trail. And I know how to follow it. I woke before sunrise. No alarm, no dreams. Just the kind of sharp, involuntary waking that comes when your body already knows what your mind hasn't admitted yet. The motel coffee was bitter. 2 creamers didn't help. I didn't bother changing out of the same sweater I'd worn yesterday. I wasn't here to be seen. I sat at the small desk by the window, flipped open my laptop, and exhaled slowly as the screen lit up. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. It wasn't about betrayal, or exile, or even the accusation itself. It was about the numbers. And the numbers. I understood. At Graybridge Forensics, I specialize in unraveling fraud that hides in plain sight, contracts with invisible clauses, invoices with tiny irregularities, transactions timed just beneath detection thresholds. I've testified in courtrooms. I've reviewed embezzlement cases that took down Fortune 500 CFOs. I wasn't just someone who understood money. I was someone who knew how it moved when it was trying not to be seen. And yet, here I was. The accused. Madeline Carter is daughter of schoolteachers, trusted with millions, suspected of stealing 50,000 from her own mother. They said it happened online, that I was the only one with access, that no one else could have done it. But they were wrong. And now, they'd given me a reason to look deeper. I started by pulling the metadata from the account setup, IP addresses, timestamps, and device registrations. 4 weeks ago, I'd helped Mom set up digital access to her account at Cascade Bank and Trust. I'd walked her through the process while she wrote everything down in her floral notepad, the one we always kept in the kitchen drawer. I'd even stayed long enough to test the login, reset the password once, and make sure she knew where to find it again. After that, I left. The first red flag showed up immediately. The first online login after I left didn't come from Mom's phone or her laptop. It came from an Android tablet connected to the home Wi-Fi. Not unusual, unless you knew that Mom didn't own a tablet. But Natalie did. And that tablet, its MAC address matched the same device Natalie once used to stream Hulu when we were stuck snowed in last December. I remembered because I had to reset the router. I remembered because she'd made fun of me for being weirdly good at IP addresses. Is the recovery phone number tied to the online banking profile not Mom's? It belonged to Evan. I cross-checked it against a call log I'd saved during a prior family contact sheet, back when we helped Mom through her minor surgery. Same number, no doubt. My fingers moved fast now, the way they do when instinct takes over and all the pieces start trying to rearrange themselves. I wasn't just looking at an accident. I was looking at a system designed to frame me. I knew that financial abuse, especially of older adults, often begins subtly, a missing check, a duplicate charge. But when it happens within a family, it doesn't feel like theft. It feels like disappointment, like betrayal, wearing your brother's smile. Our firm had recently started reviewing a series of cases involving the financial exploitation of seniors. The pattern was always similar: large withdrawals just under federal reporting limits, spaced out over days to avoid detection, multiple bank branches, no paper trail. I sent a discreet message to Theo James, our compliance lead at Graybridge. Need transaction logs. Cascade Bank and Trust, Silverfield Branch, October 1st through November 15th. Client Carter household. I didn't say it was personal. Didn't need to. Within an hour, the email pinged back. 3 withdrawals. Each was done in person. October 10th, $20,000. October 15th, $15,000. October 20th, 15,000, not a single one initiated online. And that, right there, was the first crack in their version of the story. They'd accused me of stealing $50,000 through the online system. But the money, it had walked out the front door of the bank. By hand. I leaned back in the motel chair, heart pounding, not with fear this time, but with clarity. They hadn't just misread the facts. They had built a lie. And now that lie was standing on a foundation I knew exactly how to dismantle. Brick by brick, transaction by transaction. They thought they'd buried me with numbers. But they forgot. I speak fluent numbers. The email came with 3 attachments. Each one was labeled by date and time. Each one held the kind of truth you can't argue with. Not words, not feelings, not even family denial. Just numbers and video. Cold, time-stamped evidence from Cascade Bank and Trust. The first clip loaded slowly, low resolution. A fixed-angle security camera pointed at a teller window. October 10th, 2:13 p.m. A woman approached the counter, glancing behind her twice in the span of 5 seconds. Blonde hair pulled into a ponytail, gray hoodie, sunglasses oversized enough to suggest she didn't want to be recognized. But I recognized her. Even in 480p, even with her mask pulled low. I knew that posture. I'd seen those nervous fingers drum on the kitchen table while she waited for the boys not to call back. I'd watched that same chin quiver when Mom threatened to cut her phone line in high school. I had braided that hair for picture day. It was Natalie. She stepped up, leaned slightly forward, and handed over what looked like a driver's license and a printed slip. She nodded as the teller asked a question, then lowered her mask to speak more clearly. And in that moment, just a second of clear frame, I saw her face. Not similar, not could be. It was her. The signature box appeared. She scrawled her name. Not Natalie Carter, our mother's name. The cursor blinked. The teller typed something, then disappeared from view. Natalie fidgeted, glanced around again, then grabbed a white envelope as it slid across the counter. She folded it in half before tucking it into her bag. $20,000. Cash. Not online. Not a digital transfer. Not through the app. The second clip was from October 15th, 3:41 p.m., different teller, same branch. This time it was Evan. No hoodie, no sunglasses. He walked in wearing a navy quarter zip and khakis like he'd come from a golf meeting. Confident, smooth. He smiled at the teller, leaned his elbow casually on the counter, and signed the withdrawal slip without hesitation. He laughed. Made some kind of joke. I couldn't hear it. But the teller smiled politely. Then he handed over what looked like Mom's checkbook. Another envelope. Another withdrawal. $15,000. I paused the clip before he turned to walk away. I hadn't seen him smile like that in a long time. The third video was on October 20th, 11:08 a.m. Natalie again. Same gray hoodie, different sunglasses. She didn't seem nervous this time. She moved with a kind of rhythm, like someone who had done this before and didn't need to rehearse it anymore. Her confidence made my stomach turn. 3 withdrawals, 3 dates, all in person, all at the same bank branch. Each is under the federal $10,000 reporting threshold for currency transaction alerts. Split just enough to avoid red flags. The kind of thing only someone who knew financial systems would plan, or someone living in the same house as a forensic accountant long enough to learn how I think. I closed the final clip and sat very still. They hadn't just taken the money. They'd taken trust, twisted it, used the fact that I had helped Mom set up online banking as a perfect cover story. Waited, watched, took advantage of the exact gap between what Mom understood about digital banking and what the rest of the world assumed. I opened the teller log summaries, scanned the sign-in sheets. The handwriting wasn't forged. It was real. Natalie's signature still curled the same way it did when she used to sign birthday cards with a little heart next to her name. She hadn't even tried to hide it. That was the part I couldn't shake. They weren't just careless. They were confident. Confident that no one would dig deeper. Confident that if the accusation came from the whole family, if it arrived like a wave, not a whisper, I'd go under quietly. They forgot one thing. I don't drown. I document. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just theft. It was choreography. Everything about the way the withdrawals were structured, the timing, the amounts, the lack of digital fingerprints, it all pointed to planning, not panic, not desperation, and definitely not me. I reopened the original login logs from Cascade Bank and Trust's digital portal. After helping Mom sign up, I had logged in once from her laptop, just to make sure everything worked. That was a month ago. Clean, documented, on her device, in her presence. Nothing shady. But what came next didn't match. The next login happened 4 days later, from a different device. An Android tablet, one I didn't recognize at first. The login came through the Carter home Wi-Fi, same IP address we'd had for years in Silverfield. At first, I thought maybe Mom had tried to log in again using some old gadget, but the device ID, it didn't match any of hers. Then I remembered. Last Christmas, when the snowstorm hit and we lost power for a few hours, Natalie had complained about how slow the Wi-Fi was after the router rebooted. She'd been trying to stream some old sitcom on a tablet with a cracked corner. I'd fixed the signal and jokingly rattled off the IP address to her. She rolled her eyes and called me ridiculously overprepared. That tablet? That IP? Same device? It had been used to access Mom's account multiple times, each login followed by just enough digital browsing to leave a breadcrumb trail, checking balances, reviewing transfers, nothing withdrawn online, but enough activity to suggest someone was watching closely, monitoring. I clicked into the account recovery section, the details you only see if you know where to look. Security questions, alternate email, phone number for two-factor authentication. That's when I found it. The recovery email wasn't the one I set up with Mom. It was new, quietly added in the background. No alert sent, no flag raised. Just a new line in a long list of back-end metadata. The email handle was familiar. Natalie used to run a photography blog in college, Silverframes88. She abandoned it years ago. But the recovery email Silverframes88, some provider, still active, still tied to Natalie. I checked the recovery phone number. My stomach turned. It wasn't Mom's number. It was Evan's. Still listed on an old family contact sheet I kept saved in my drive. The last 4 digits were burned into my memory. He'd used it for everything. Gaming logins, fantasy football. That number had shown up every time we tried to reach him for emergencies. They hadn't just guessed the system. They'd mapped it. Natalie had the device. Evan had the recovery line. And both of them had access to the house, the drawer, and the notebook where Mom kept every login I helped her create. That drawer had no lock, just trust. I stood up from the motel desk, took a few steps toward the window. The curtains were drawn, but I could still feel the shape of the morning pressing against the glass. Cold, thin, barely there. I wanted to believe this was just about money, but it wasn't. It was about control, about who gets to be trusted, about who gets to tell the story. And they'd told one loud enough, firm enough, in unison, so that no one would think to question it, not even Mom. Especially not Mom, because I was the one who set up the account. I was the one who pushed her to go paperless. I was the one who had always acted like the adult in the room. They used that against me. They made the story easy to believe. I turned back to the screen, opened a new folder on my desktop, labeled it simply Carter Case, Internal. No court yet. No police. Not even a confrontation. But now I had IP logs, device IDs, a fake recovery email, a phone number that didn't belong to the victim, and 3 video clips from the bank. It was starting to take shape. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was fraud. And I had just started collecting receipts. I didn't call ahead, didn't text, didn't ask if they'd be home. I already knew they would be. Monday evening, just past 5. That strange in-between hour when the town of Silverfield slows down, but the house on Linden Court comes alive with clattering dishes and overlapping voices. I pulled up to the curb and parked across the street. The front yard looked exactly the same. Porch light already glowing. A rake propped by the steps. Evan's SUV in the driveway. Natalie's compact was tucked right behind it. Mom's old sedan, still dented on the passenger door, sat where it always did. I didn't turn off the engine right away. For a moment, I just sat there, one hand on the key, the other resting on the black folder in my lap. The folder was slim, clean, and zipped tight. Inside full-color printouts, stills from bank footage, login metadata, recovery emails, teller slips, labeled, indexed, numbered. I knew the weight of what I carried. It wasn't just proof. It was the truth they had refused to ask for. I turned off the engine. The air outside was sharp, filled with the scent of wood smoke and rosemary. The last golden light of day slanted across the lawn. I walked up the steps, like I had 100 times before, but this time felt different. Not like I was returning home, like I was walking into court. The door was unlocked. It always was. I stepped inside. Voices drifted in from the kitchen, clinks of silverware, a low hum of conversation. Someone laughed. Natalie. Maybe. The sound felt distant, like it came from a different version of her, a version I didn't recognize anymore. They didn't hear me at first. I walked slowly down the hallway, past the living room, where the fall wreath still hung above the fireplace, past the dining table, already half set for dinner, into the kitchen, where time seemed to pause the moment they saw me. Natalie was perched on the counter, swinging her legs like she was 13 again, coffee mug in hand. Evan leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, casual. Mom stood by the sink, drying a pan. Dad stirred something on the stove, wooden spoon in hand. All of them looked up. No one spoke. I didn't offer a greeting, didn't ask how they were. I just crossed to the kitchen island, the one we used to roll out cookie dough on, and set the black folder down on the smooth wood surface. The sound of the zipper sliding open cut through the silence like a thread snapping. I looked at all of them, steady and clear. My voice didn't shake. You believed I stole from Mom. I said, let me show you what really happened. No one moved. I reached in and pulled out the first sheet. A still frame from the Cascade Bank security footage. Natalie in sunglasses and a hoodie, lowering her mask to speak to the teller. October 10th, $20,000. Not online. Not me. Natalie didn't respond. Her fingers tightened around the coffee mug. I laid down the second photo. Evan, in a navy sweater, smiling, handed over a slip to the teller. October 15th, 15,000. He looked at the floor, said nothing. The third photo. Natalie again. Different sunglasses, same hoodie, the date and time are circled in red. I added the teller slips beneath them. Same branch, same account, same signatures. I matched them to handwriting from the fridge note you left last week. Natalie. Silence. Then Natalie's voice. Thin, sharp. You went through our stuff. I tilted my head. Calm. You went through Mom's. Mom hadn't spoken yet. She stepped forward now. Slowly. Her eyes moved from the photos to the slips to my face. Her hands trembled just slightly. But the bank said it was online, she whispered. I nodded. That's what they assumed. Because the account was accessed from the Carter Wi-Fi, from an Android tablet, using a recovery email tied to Natalie's old blog. The two-factor authentication. It went to Evan's phone. The room stilled. Dad stopped stirring. The burner clicked off. I didn't gloat, didn't raise my voice. I wasn't here to win. I was here because I hadn't had a chance to be heard. And now, I was done waiting for permission. I stepped back, leaving the folder open. The truth laid bare between us. No apologies were offered. None were expected. No one touched the folder. The photos lay open on the kitchen island like evidence at a quiet trial. Faces caught mid-sentence. Signatures looped in familiar ink. Withdrawal slips time-stamped and unarguable. The room, once warm with steam and conversation, now felt still, dense, like it had swallowed its own air. Natalie stared at the still frame of herself in the gray hoodie. Her mug rested in her lap now, both hands wrapped around it like it could anchor her. She hadn't said a word in 5 minutes. Evan leaned back against the fridge, arms crossed tightly now, not casual anymore, guarded. Mom stood between them, her dish towel crumpled in one hand, her eyes moving slowly from page to page. She didn't speak. Not yet. I didn't move either. I had shown them everything. The truth wasn't abstract now. It was printed in full color, aligned with facts, with data, with dates. There was nothing left to interpret, only to admit. Natalie broke first. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even loud. It was tired. You always get everything. I looked at her. She wasn't looking back. She was watching the mug, watching the way her thumb moved across the rim, over and over. The job, the respect, the attention. You walk into a room and everyone listens. Mom brags about your promotions. Dad tells people you made it out. I just wanted to even it out. Even it out. Like this was a balance sheet and not our family. You didn't even think it out, I said, carefully. You lit it on fire. Evan cleared his throat. His voice came low and flat. It wasn't personal. I turned to him slowly. You helped steal from our mother. You let me take the fall for it. And then you told her not to let me come back. What part of that isn't personal? He didn't answer. Didn't blink. Mom stepped forward. Finally, as if waking up from something. She looked down at the folder again, at the familiar curl of Natalie's handwriting, at the still of Evan handed over the check. Her face was unreadable, neither angry nor heartbroken, just empty. You never asked me, I said quietly, turning to her. She met my eyes. And you never asked if I did it. I continued. You just believed them. You didn't even question it. Her hands lowered to her sides. The dish towel slipped from her grip. I didn't want to believe it. She whispered. I told myself it had to be a mistake. But the bank said it was online. That's all. They didn't say it was me. She swallowed hard, but said nothing else. I exhaled slowly, not to calm myself, but to clear the weight building in my chest. The weight of a daughter who had brought pie for her mother and left with a scar she hadn't earned. Natalie finally looked at me. Her eyes weren't full of regret. Just a bitter clarity. You've always been the one everyone looked up to, she said. Even when we were kids. You were the one who solved the math problems, who fixed the printer, who made everything work. I just got tired of standing next to you and feeling like I wasn't enough. I didn't know what to say to that, because I hadn't made her feel that way. She had chosen to, and now she had chosen this. Dad stood behind the stove, one hand still on the counter. He hadn't said a word since I walked in. He looked older than he had on Thanksgiving, his shoulders a little lower, his face more gray than I remembered. He finally asked, Madeline, what are you going to do? I looked at him, at all of them, for the first time in weeks. I didn't feel like the child in the room. I felt like the only adult. I didn't need to raise my voice. The folder had done most of the talking, the photos, the signatures, the timestamps. Every piece of evidence sat under the kitchen light like cold, clean truth. I watched them, my family, stand in its shadow, silent. Not because they didn't have words, but because they knew none of theirs could stand beside mine. I'm not pressing charges, I said calmly. Natalie looked up. Her eyes flickered with something. Relief, maybe, or confusion. Evan shifted, one foot scuffing the tile. But I did send the file to the family attorney. I continued. What happens next? That's between you and the law, not me. Dad exhaled, slow and deep. His hand dropped from the stove. The room smelled like something had started to burn, but no one moved to fix it. I zipped the folder shut. Each tooth of the zipper clicked like punctuation. Final, unmistakable. I didn't come here for forgiveness, I said, or for an apology. No one offered one anyway. I came because you demanded the money back. And I needed you to understand. I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough. I never took it. I looked at each of them in turn. At Thanksgiving, you told me not to come back unless I returned the money. I picked up the folder, tucked it under my arm. I didn't bring the money. I said softly. I brought the truth. No one tried to stop me. Not even Mom. She just stood there, hands clasped in front of her, eyes glassy, but still not spilling over. Maybe it hadn't hit her yet, or maybe it had, and she didn't know how to carry it. Natalie didn't say a word. The bitterness was gone from her face now, replaced with something colder, smaller. Evan looked down again, like the tile might offer him a version of the story he could live with. It didn't. I turned toward the hallway, past the dining table, past the framed family photos that suddenly felt like artifacts from a life I'd never actually lived. At the doorway, I paused, not because I had more to say, but because they needed to hear it one last time. Thanksgiving's over, I said quietly. You made sure of that. Then I opened the front door and stepped into the evening air. I didn't take the folder back, didn't take the pie still sitting on the counter, didn't wait for anyone to call after me, because no one did. And that silence told me more than their words ever had. Portland hadn't changed. The bridges still shimmered at sunset. The cafes still played jazz at 9 a.m. The leaves along Hawthorne were still amber and gold, curling at the edges like they always did this time of year. The city moved on, unaware of the silence I carried with me. But I wasn't the same. I walked back into my apartment as if I hadn't left it 2 days earlier. Keys on the hook, shoes by the door, my fern, overwatered by the neighbor. Bless her. Drooping slightly but still alive. Everything was in its place, except me. I unpacked slowly. Sweater, laptop, the folder. I didn't put it back on the bookshelf. Instead, I slid it into the drawer beneath the printer. Out of sight. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I'd already done that. The office at Greybridge welcomed me back like nothing had happened. Theo gave me a nod, the kind that meant he knew more than he was asking. My inbox was full. My audit team was waiting on updates, and my schedule was tight. It was familiar, busy, safe. But I didn't call on Sunday, didn't check the family group chat, left the voicemail icon blinking on my screen for 3 full days before I finally tapped play. It was Mom, Madeline. Her voice was soft, slower than usual. I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now, and that's okay. I needed to say something. A pause. I could hear her breathe. I was wrong. She didn't say forgive me. Didn't try to explain it away. Didn't say Evan made her do it. Or Natalie lied. Or the bank misled her. She just repeated it. Quieter this time. I was wrong. And I know that now. There was another breath. A long one. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know. Click. No goodbye. No. I love you. Just the sound of the line disconnecting before the machine could cut her off. I sat there for a moment, phone still in hand, screen fading to black. There was nothing dramatic in her voice. No tears, no cracked emotion trying to claw its way through. Just that quiet, steady confession that came too late to fix anything, but not too late to say out loud. And that mattered more than I expected. I didn't cry. I didn't call her back. Not then. But I didn't delete the voicemail either. I saved it. Gave it a name, Nove. Truth. Because even if it couldn't undo what happened, it was still something real. And after everything, after being erased, accused, replaced, what I craved most wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. And for the first time in weeks, It had finally come. Not from the ones who lied, but from the one who, for a moment, had forgotten to ask. The envelope was thin, no return address, just my name in slanted cursive, ink slightly smudged at the edges, like her hand might have hesitated before sealing it. It arrived 5 days after the voicemail. No text, no warning, just the quiet presence of something handwritten in a world too used to screens. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the counter while I brewed coffee, took a shower, watered the fern. I told myself I didn't need to read it, that it wouldn't change anything, but it sat there, patient and persistent, like it had every right to take up space. When I finally broke the seal, something slipped out and landed softly on the floor. A photo, old, faded slightly at the corners. I recognized it instantly. Back porch of the Silverfield house. Halloween. Maybe 20 years ago. 3 kids in mismatched costumes. I was the scarecrow. Straw taped to my sleeves. Flannel shirt too big for my frame. Natalie wore tinfoil wings, grinning at something off camera. Evan was covered in red paint. We never did figure out what he was supposed to be. We were sitting on a pumpkin-colored blanket, our legs crossed, candy buckets in front of us. We looked happy, not perfect, but whole. I turned the photo over. There, in the same handwriting as the envelope, was a single line. We didn't know how much we would miss you until you weren't here. No signature, no date, just that. I sat down at the kitchen table, the photo still in my hand. My thumb traced the edge of it like I might smooth out what time had already wrinkled. It wasn't an apology. It didn't try to undo what had been said, what had been done. It didn't ask for a reply or beg for reunion. It just told the truth, quietly, simply. And that truth carried more weight than any courtroom letter or lawyer's call ever could. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. I could almost hear that night, our childhood voices, the crinkle of candy wrappers, the creak of the back porch swing. Before bank accounts and accusations, before assumptions hardened into verdicts, before love had to be proven. I placed the photo in a drawer beside my saved voicemail. 2 small things that didn't ask for forgiveness, but acknowledged the cost of their absence. I didn't call her, didn't write back. But for the first time, I let myself wonder, not what they wanted now, or what they regretted, but what it meant to be missed by people who had once chosen to forget you. And whether missing someone was enough. It started as a favor. Portland Community College had reached out looking for someone to lead a short seminar on financial literacy for older adults, how to spot scams, understand online banking, and set up fraud alerts. A practical course, nothing flashy, just 2 Saturdays, a whiteboard, and a borrowed projector. I said yes without thinking too hard. Not because I had time, but because I needed something quiet, something useful, something that made sense. The classroom was small. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the kind of space built for night classes and volunteer groups. But it was warm, familiar in its simplicity. Most of the students were in their 60s, maybe 70s. A retired nurse, a widowed math teacher, a pair of sisters who sat together and finished each other's sentences. They brought notepads and reading glasses, asked thoughtful questions, and scribbled reminders in tidy handwriting. They reminded me of my mother, not the version who looked away when I needed her, but the one who used to double-check bank statements by hand, who called me at Stanford to ask if she was doing it right when paying a bill online, the one who always read the fine print, twice, just to be safe. I found myself explaining things slower than I usually would, not because they couldn't understand, but because I wanted them to feel safe asking, because somewhere in the back of my mind, I was still talking to her. By the second class, we were reviewing real case examples, fraud patterns, phishing texts, forged signatures. One woman raised her hand. She wore a wool coat even indoors, her silver hair braided neatly down one side. She'd sat near the front both weekends, quiet, always listening. Her voice was soft, but sure. "I wish I had a daughter like you," she said. The room was still. No one laughed. No one added anything. Just that sentence, offered like a gift she didn't expect me to accept. I smiled, gently, not out of pride, but I understood what she meant. Not the words, the ache beneath them. I didn't tell her that my own mother had once wished for a daughter less complicated, less stubborn, less thorough. I didn't say that I had once brought home pie on Thanksgiving and been asked to return money I never took. I didn't explain the folder in my drawer, or the voicemail I hadn't played again, or the photo I still couldn't look at without wondering if it had been sent out of guilt or grief. I just nodded. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." She gave a small smile in return, then lowered her eyes back to her notes. Class resumed, but for the first time in a long time, something in me softened, not healed, not erased, just loosened. The tightness in my chest I hadn't noticed until then gave way, just a little. Sometimes, the people who see your worth aren't the ones who raised you. Sometimes, they're strangers in a classroom on a rainy Saturday, and sometimes, that's enough to begin again. The folder is still there. Second drawer, left side, just below the printer, tucked between last year's tax returns and an unopened box of envelopes. Black cover, silver zipper. No dust, because I clean around it. But I haven't opened it since that night. I don't need to. The truth doesn't change just because no one's looking at it. And I've already spent enough of my life trying to make people see what they refuse to ask. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any confession. It's strange, the way something so heavy can lose its weight without being thrown away. That folder once felt like armor. Now, it feels like history, important, but no longer urgent. Natalie hasn't reached out. Neither has Evan. According to a cousin who still talks to my mother, they both moved out of the Silverfield house not long after I left. Mom never asked me to come back, but she also never asked me to forget. That matters. I still go to work, still teach the Saturday seminar, still brew coffee too strong in the mornings, and read old finance articles at night like they're poetry. Life moves forward in quiet ways. There's no grand reconciliation, no tearful phone call, just space. And in that space, I found something I never expected: peace. Not the kind that comes when everything is okay, but the kind you build when you stop waiting for permission to breathe. I survived something that should have broken me. Not just the betrayal, the erasure, the way your own name can be rewritten in a single accusation, like trust never existed, like love has conditions printed in fine print. You didn't know you were signing. But I'm still here. No one is asking for receipts anymore. No one is pointing fingers. And more importantly, no one gets to define me but me. The folder stays where it is, not as a reminder of what they did, but of what I proved. Madeline didn't need to open the folder again, because the truth was never for them. It was for her. And in the silence that followed, she finally heard herself. If this story spoke to something in you, share it in the comments. And if you believe in quiet strength and earned peace, consider subscribing. There's more to come.